Hi, I'm RAINE Emery and I have exciting news. I worked with Simplicity to create patterns and this is the Water Fairy design. It is Simplicity 302. This is pattern 3028 and it is my Water Fairy design and we are going to do a tutorial on it today. So let's get started. But quick note, if you have any method that you want to do instead of what I do, that is totally okay. This is your project. This is your creativity. You do what works best for you. So here we have Simplicity 3028. And if you look on the back, on the flap of the envelope, there is the sizing information right here. For this tutorial, I will be using size 12 because that matches up my measurements pretty accurately. There is suggested fabrics. There are notions right here. Since I will be making a size 12, I'm going to be looking right down here for all my fabric measurement needs. Here are all the bodice pieces that have been cut out and reserve some time to cut them all out because they are a lot of layers. And what we will do now is fuse the interfacing to the interlining layer of the bodice. So here I have the interfacing and the interlining. Flip it to the wrong side. Now I'll flip this to the side that has the glue, the bumpy part, down. And I'll press it down with an iron. Something I want to mention is that if you feel that your interlining fabric is already thick and strong enough as it is, then you do not have to add the interfacing. These are the interlining pieces with the interfacing fused to them. So what we're going to do is we're not going to worry about the bottom right now. Just gonna worry about the top portion. We'll just focus on these two right now. Flip it right sides up. Then we will take the side upper front and place the right side down on top of the other right side. You'll match up the notches. Where is it? There it is. See right here, there is a little bit of excess because it is on the curve. So you will have to ease that in. And you're gonna repeat this on the other side. If you are having a little bit of a struggle, you can clip in between the notches and it's easier to pin down. Then sew down 5/8 to create a seam. Alright, so we've got that sewn and what I stitched with is a purple thread so you can see it a little bit better. We're going to flip this out so the right side is up again. And then we're going to take our upper back, the right side down, and pin it to the side of the upper side front, matching the notches. Where are the notches? Stitch this down 5/8 as well and repeat on the other side. All right, now we're going to join these two together, right side up and the other right side down, and then you're going to stitch down 5/8 of an inch to this dot and you're going to reinforce it there. Great, so now that we have the upper bodice part sewn, we're now going to trim it down to about 1/4 inch. I just like to cut it in half. I'll take it and I'll just trim it down like so. And then we're going to press it. And if some of the seams don't lay as flat as you would like, what you can do is you can clip it a little bit places that need it, which generally are curves. Last thing of this upper bodice for now is you're going to stay stitched from here to here and from here to the center front right here. Alright, so we stitched from here to here and here to here, repeated on the other side, about 3/8 of an inch. Now we're going to set aside the upper part of the bodice and work on the lower part of the bodice. So what we're going to do to start out is going to take the front lower bodice and do a stay stitching line according to the pattern. And once you've done that, you're going to grab your scissors and you're going to cut to, but not through, the dot. This will help later, like that. And now we get to put all the pieces together. So next, I'm going to lay down the lower middle front, pin it down here, and pin it down here as well, and sew down 5/8 of an inch, matching up notches and right sides to right sides. Now we're going to take the lower side front, and we're going to match up notches, right sides together, and sew down 5/8 again. Oh my goodness, it's looking like a bodice already. Before we attach the other pieces though, what we're gonna do is what we did on the upper bodice, and we're gonna trim it down and clip the curves and then press the seams. Now that it's all nice and pressed, we're gonna attach the last two pieces. So according to the pattern instructions, they request you to sew these two pieces together first. So the lower side back and the lower back together first before you attach it to the main piece here. Right sides together, matching notches, the lower side back and lower back together. And now that we're done sewing that, we're gonna attach this side right here to this side right here. Right sides together, matching notches, 5/8 seam. Oh, that matches up so well. And after this is sewn, we are going to trim the seams, clip the curves, and press like we did the other seams. And lo and behold, it is the lower bodice. Woo! We're gonna bring back the upper bodice, and we are gonna sew these together. Flip the upper bodice upside down, right sides to right sides, matching up the dots right here. And then we're just gonna pin all the way down here and all the way down here. Something to note is to match these seams up right here so it looks like a continuous seam. The same goes for the side seam right here. And now, like the other seams, we're gonna trim and press it open. So there you have it. That is how you sew one layer of the bodice. So good job if you made it this far. I know it's a lot of seams to do, but good news, you get to do it 2 more times. I really hope that you are not con crunching or having to make this project super last minute. Heaven knows that's something I would do, but if so, may the sewing god smile upon you because you're gonna need it. So you are gonna put together the other 2 layers, the fashion fabric layer and the lining layer, the same way that we put together the interlining, and I will see you then after we put them all together. Okay, I am back and we have successfully sewn the interlining that we worked on together, the lining and base fabric, but right now we are going to just focus on the interlining once again. With our interlining layer, we're going to flip it over to the wrong side where all the seams are. Using a 5/8 inch twill tape, we're going to place these on the seams in the center of them, but there are some without seams that extend to either the upper bodice or the lower bodice, so you are going to do a straight shot, and what I mean by that is you're going to put it down like this and then just follow it up like that. You're going to place it in the center, the upper bodice, and just straight shot it down to the bottom. The twill tape is all pinned on now, and these are going to become our boning channels later. So now we're going to edge stitch on both sides of them to create that channel. This is what it'll look like when all the twill tape is sewn down. I used purple thread again, so hopefully you can see a little bit better. And in some areas, they are definitely not perfect, so don't worry, this will be on the inside if you mess up a little bit. Next are the cups for the bust. This will also be attached to the inner lining. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take the most curved part right here and insert it in there. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to flatten it down to make pinning a little bit easier. And then you're going to repeat it on this side as well and try to get them as even as possible. And if you need to measure it, you absolutely can. Once that's all pinned in, you're going to zigzag stitch around all of it, leaving openings at the boning channels here. And that's what it looks like when it's all done. Now for the boning. I'm using a 1/4 inch spiral steel boning for mine, but if you have other preferences, go for it. And I'm going to measure up through each channel, and then I'm going to subtract about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of that. I'm going to add boning tips to each side. Something that is really helpful to insert the boning, especially in this case because these seam lines will snag the boning when you're trying to put it in, is to use a chopstick or a knitting needle and just slip it through, and then you can insert the boning. Alright, now we've got all the boning in, and we're going to base to stitch 1/2 inch from the top here and 3/4 of an inch from the bottom here. Alright, we basted the top and the bottom where the boning channels are, and this just helps to keep the boning in place when we sew other things together. But now what we're going to do is we're going to flip this over, and we're going to take our fashion fabric, so our outer layer, the layer that's going to be seen, the wrong side on the right side, pin the top and the bottom together and baste 3/8 of an inch. Now we're going to put the bodice to the side and we're going to start working on the sleeve. These are the gathering lines of where we're going to attach the elastic to. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. I have all the elastic that I cut out and I just pinned it on here just to make sure I knew which was which because it can be a little bit confusing. So we're only going to be using these top 3 right here, so 20, 21, and 22 for this step of the sleeve. This is the top here, this is the bottom here. On the top here, they're going to do the longest one, which is 20, 21 on the middle line, 22 on the lowest line. So I have the 2 elastics for the lowest one. I'm going to set one aside. So that is the halfway point right there. I'm going to do the same on this elastic. Fold it in half and mark it with a pin. I'm going to match this up right here and pin it. You are going to move this all the way over here and pin it on the edge and on the other edge too. While you sew, you are going to stretch it out like this and sew that way. Sometimes the fabric is a bit longer and the elastic isn't as stretchy, so in that case you can use a gathering stitch along the line and gather it a little bit and let the elastic do the rest of the work. We do want the elastic to stretch though, so use a zigzag stitch because this is going to go on the arm. I did end up using a gathering stitch on this lower line because it was pretty long and my elastic is not stretchy enough, so I'm going to gather it just a little bit so it can fit the length of the stretched out elastic. This process will be repeated on these other 2 lines and also the other sleeve as well. Look how pretty it's getting! It's starting to form the bubbles a little bit. So what we're gonna do next is fold it, what was it, hot dog style? I like to match up the elastics. So pin it all the way down and sew 5/8. So the way that I'm going to finish this thing, because the raw edges do like to fray a lot, is just through a serger. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea and not everybody has a serger. So if you want to do a zigzag stitch and finish the seam or do a French seam should work on this as well. Alright, next is to hem the bottom edge of the sleeve. So this is inside out, but let me kind of show you where we're going to hem it with a narrowed rolled hem. So we're going to roll this edge right here, and I've gone ahead and serged it so the fraying wouldn't be as bad. But what I like to do is I like to fold it over about 1/4 of an inch, give or take, press it, fold it over again another about 1/4 of an inch and press it, and then I like to edge stitch right here on the inside. It'll look something like this and it's nice and neat. And if you want to, you can add trim to the edge of it to make it a little bit more sparkly, pizzazz-y. So the last thing for the sleeves for now will be to gather the top edge of the sleeve. There's 1 dot here and there's 1 dot here according to the pattern, and we're gonna do a gathering stitch from this dot right here, the furthest away from the seam, all the way around to the other dot on the other side. That's the furthest away from the seam right there. Now go ahead and press that seam towards the back. Look how cool that is! It looks like a bubble. Ah! Setting the sleeves aside, we're gonna work on the bodice overlays now. So this is the front bodice overlay and this is the back bodice overlay. We cut them on the bias so they will stretch when they are attached to the bodice and they'll look really pretty. For these 2 pieces, we are gonna sew them together by the side seams. We're gonna take this, right sides to right sides, place it on this one right here, right sides to right sides. You'll pin it down and sew it 5/8 of an inch. I just moved the table just a couple more inches. That's silly, why would I do that? Alright, those are now attached and I'll let you see both sides. Here's the fun part. Oh crap, I forgot my pins over there. So the raw edge is staring up at you. So we're folding the wrong side to the wrong side, like that. You're gonna match up the raw edges here, and then you're gonna pin all along this line and basted all along this line 3/8 of an inch. And then, of course, press it. Press this line down right here. All right, the top is basted and we press down the bottom. Next, we're gonna find the center of the overlay and we're going to stitch a straight line from one dot to the other with a gathering stitch. You're gonna do another gathering stitch on the center back right here, another gathering stitch here about 3/8. Oh, and add a gathering stitch on the shoulder seam right here. So there would be 5 places that you will add the gathering stitches to. So that would be the center front, the side seams, and on the center back. So the instructions say to pull up these gathering stitches only on the side seams, about 2 to 2.5 inches. For the center front, I'm gonna pull out these elastics again, and number 17 elastic guide for front is the one that we're going to use. It's so tiny compared to it, oh my gosh. So having already worked with this elastic a little bit, this is not really gonna fit everything, so I am gonna gather up a little bit, and I'm gonna pin one side, the top here, matching raw edges, centering it on top of the stitching line. I'm gonna fold down on this edge of the elastic about 1/2 inch. So where the crease is where I'm going to fold it over like that. So about 1/2 inch is on this side. I'm gonna pin that like that, and then I am gonna go ahead and take this to the machine and do a zigzag stitch down this. The decorative elastic has been sewn onto the center front. Using the decorative elastics that we cut out of guide 18, we're going to do the same thing, except we're just gonna fold it under 1/4 of an inch, pin it on top. So we are not gonna go under like we did the center front. Adjust it a little bit more, because if you stretch it out too much, it's just gonna go like whoop, and repeat on the other shoulder seam. So if you see these little elastic pieces sticking up too much for your liking, you can press them down with an iron, and that's a lot better. Just a quick note here, if you don't like the way that the elastic flips up a little bit, you can just gather it all the way to the shape of the elastic and not gather with it. I personally like a little bit of a curve because it gives that little whimsical look. So this is the fashion fabric layer and the interlining layer that we worked on with Bodice. And now we are going to take the bodice overlay and start pinning it all together. So we're going to take the top raw edge and we're going to start in the center right here and pin with the top raw edge of the bodice. We match up dots along the way. So if you see, there is a dot here on the side upper front. There is a dot on the upper back. And you are going to leave this gap right here open because this is going to be the armhole. You're just going to pin everything else along the way, and you're going to stitch to these dots right here. Yeah, that's that side. We're going to do it again on this side. Start pinning along the way, again just leaving this space in between where the shoulder seam is free. So now you are going to stitch 3/8 of an inch all the way to the dot, back stitch and reinforce that, and then move over here, back stitch and reinforce on the dot, and sew all the way down here. Repeat on the other side. I hope you all are ready to hand sew now because that's what we're gonna do. So we have the top sewn here, arm opening here, arm opening here, and it's attached everywhere else. So pin the center to the center, and then looking out for this dot, you're gonna match it to this seam right here. So this is the middle front and the side front seam. You're gonna match the other dot to the seam where the side back and the center back meet. Made it a little bit easier for you guys because I know dots are a lot, but seeing the seams is a little bit easier. I am pinning the folded edge right along the seam that connects the upper bodice from the lower bodice. Gather it and evenly distribute it. And you're going to base this down, the center back where the gathers are, and you are going to hand stitch, so slip stitch, from here to here, and from here all the way to the other point over here. Then you're going to slip stitch that, and there you go. We have the center back basted right here on the upper bodice overlay, and we have the hand stitch points right here, all along here, all completed. Now it's time for attaching the sleeve to the bodice. And this might be a little bit tricky, so I'm gonna try and not have my hands in the way. I have the sleeve here. This is the top of the sleeve. See that side seam right there? I'm going to pin this seam, the sleeve seam, and pin it on that seam right there. And oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh hi! Match those two dots. There and there. And then you're gonna sew down 3/8 of an inch. Just on from, oh, okay. And you're gonna sew down 3/8 from this point and to this point. So let me show you what it looks like when it's all pinned. You're just gonna sew 3/8 from here to here. And you're gonna reinforce at these 2 points. We have all that sewn down. So next, what I did just to start out, I matched up the center dot right here on the sleeve with the shoulder seam elastic. So I'm taking the dot where the gathers start, and I'm gonna fold it down. So the fold, it goes towards the inner seam. Fold it down to that other dot, to that point, and I pin it down. So that creates a pleat. Do the same thing on the other side. Hold it down. And pin that. The dot should be right where the bodice overlay starts to come out from the bodice. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to gather it until it fits this length of the bodice overlay, matching raw edges. And oh dear goodness, it is so frayed. So maybe don't use the fabric that I used. So that looks like it'll almost fit. So let me gather it a little bit more. The gathering stitch is like actually frayed off. Oh my gosh, I can't with this fabric. What did I do to deserve this? Oh yeah, I'm putting you all through this as well, so that's probably why. If you chose fabric that doesn't fray as much as this, good for you. We did it! So now you're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch around here, just from this point all the way around to this point, so it's like a little rainbow. And then after that, you're gonna stitch another 3/8, but separately onto this bodice, just to tack down the pleat. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I think that was the most difficult thing that I've done so far on this project. So you can finish the seam however you want to, like with a narrow rolled hem, or with a zigzag stitch, or serging like I did with mine. Now we're gonna pull out our last elastic guide, which is elastic guide 19. I'm gonna fold it in half, I'm gonna mark that. I'm gonna pin this to the outside, the top of the overlay and sleeve seam. Then I'm gonna bring this edge down over to the base right here where the dot is and where the bodice overlay starts to come out from the bodice. Pin that there. The same thing on the other side. Stretch it out, grab about halfway in between, pin that down. When you sew, like with the other elastics, you just stretch it out and do a zigzag stitch all along the line of this. So after you've sewn all the way around this, tack these down separately onto the bodice itself. Woohoo, we did it! Good job! Now we get to set this aside and work on the skirt portion. The bodice is pretty, but what I think really makes this design is the skirt. So here I have the center front of the lining. Everything that I will show you on this part of the skirt, we will repeat on the contrast. I have already done stay stitching right here, and I am going to clip it to but not through the divot. This will help later when we're attaching this to the bodice. We are going to grab the side front and start pinning each side down and then sewing down 5/8. And of course, match the notches and match the ends. Center front and side front panels of the skirt are sewn together. The seams are pressed towards the back, and I use purple thread so you can see what I'm doing. And the seams are finished with serging, so that's why they are shorter. You can trim it down, you can zigzag stitch it, you can also French seam it if you are inclined to do so, but that takes a lot more time, so we are gonna just stick with serging for now. Next, we are going to sew together the center back seam. Okay, now onto center backs with number 12. Interfacing, you'll apply that onto the top of the center back skirt. And for now, just ignore the serging. So there are 2 dots here. There's 1 dot right here and 1 dot right here. We're going to be focusing on this dot right here. With this dot, you are going to sew 1 inch on each side. So just a single layer, so this will just be like stay stitching. Make sure you know where that dot is. And repeat on the other side as well. Each side has a reinforcing stitch there. We are going to pin these together and sew down the skirt seam. Again, ignoring the serging for now. I'm going to mark about a 1/4 inch below the dot that we were just using. And that is where I'm going to start sewing. Do a reinforcing stitch right there and go all the way down center back with a 5/8 inch seam. From that point that we did the reinforcing back stitch, we're going to clip it to, but not through. And then from here all the way down to the end, you're going to finish the edges. And then we're going to stitch together the side back to the center back. And if you get confused on what side goes where, take a look at the amount of notches on each side. So this side has 2 notches, and on the center back has 2 notches. So that means the side with the 2 notches goes right here. The side back and the center back have been pinned together. So while we're at it, go ahead and pin the center front and front piece that we worked on earlier. And you're gonna sew all of these seams 5/8 of an inch as well. And like the others, serge it and press it towards the back. So this layer of the skirt is all sewn together and it looks really good. Very long in the back. So this will be 1 layer out of 2 of them, and this is just the base. So if you had so much fun making this as much as I did, you're gonna make another one of these as the contrast. I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and I'll meet you back here once I finish. Oh my goodness! Okay, I'm back and we have the contrast of the skirt sewn all together. So the next step is to attach the skirt to the bodice. So I attached the overlay skirt, or the contrast of the skirt, to the bodice with the fabric and the interlining. I will show you how to do this with the lining fabrics. So pinning right sides together, I'm gonna take the top of the lining skirt. So this is why we sewed in the stay stitch and clipped it. It'll match the shape a little bit better. So it'll go like that. I'm gonna match up the ends, and then I'm gonna match up the back side seam and the back seams. And the side seams, it's that 5/8 mark, it should match. Front middle seam and the front side seam should also match at the 5/8 mark. And then once you get all that pinned up, you're gonna sew up 5/8 of an inch and then finish however you'd like. I've got that all sewn together and I pressed the seam down towards the skirt. And something to note is that if you're working with sheer fabric like me, this will be facing the inside. The serge seams will be facing out. This will be seen on the outside. So if you do not like that, you can flip this around. So you can sew the right side of the bodice to the wrong side of the skirt. So now pull out number 24. We're gonna fold it lengthwise, also known as hot dog style, and we're gonna pin it, and from the edge, we're gonna sew down 1/4 of an inch, and then we're gonna turn it inside out after trimming it. All right, so it's all sewn together and I trimmed it down, so now we gotta flip it inside out. But I like to use this cool tool called a loop turner. Ta-da! So I've gone ahead and pressed these 2. We're gonna create these loops in 2-inch pieces, and we're gonna need about 26 of them. Let's see if these are enough. And 26, there we go. We're gonna take pattern number 23, and this is gonna be our loop guide. Match up this dot down here with the dot down here, the one that we sewed a stay stitch through. I'm gonna pin it and line it up so it ends right here. So I'm gonna also pin that, and I'm gonna work my way down, marking all of these dots except for the dot down here. With each of these dots, I'm gonna match up with one of these. I like to have the seam up, so when you flip it over, you will not see the seam. I like to find the dot, kind of pressing this up against the other loop. It's overlapping it a little bit, like so. Then I'm bringing this other side around to the dot and going about halfway between the dot and the edge right here and pinning that in. I'm gonna repeat all the way down. Baste this through the dots 5/8 of an inch, and then after we're all done basting this, we're gonna repeat this on the other side. So now I'm gonna fold down one side and then take the layer, right sides together, lay it down like that. Make sure to match up the seam that divides the skirt and bodice, and match it up all the way to the bottom where the little clip is right here, and also matching up the upper and lower bodice seam. There you go, and we're gonna sew all the way down here with 5/8 of an inch and backstitch at this dot right here that we are so fond of at this point. I have both seams sewn on either side, and it may look like a mess right now, but we're going to turn it inside out. And the inside looks really nice and pretty. So what we're gonna do now is press down on this edge right here so that the loops stick out and it's nice and flat. And after we're done with that, we're gonna stitch a 1/2 of an inch from the edge here all the way down, squaring at the bottom and all the way back up so we can create another boning channel. The 2 boning channels right here have been made. I've measured the length of the boning channel itself, and I've subtracted 1 inch to get this length. So we're gonna put it in. So if you have sheer fabric here, I like to put it in as close to the body as possible so you don't have to see it on the outside. And then this is completely optional, but I like to keep the boning in place. So at the bottom, I'm going to just stitch where it ends, just like a little tack. Number 25 is the bias binding for around the top, sealing this raw edge. What I like to use is a bias tape maker so I can make my own. And the spout here is 3/4 of an inch, but it makes a 1/2 inch bias tape. So let me show you how to do that. Fold it in right side down. I'm just gonna pull it out a little bit, and as you can see, it folds in on itself like that. I'm just gonna press an iron to it, constantly moving my iron with it. Once that is all pressed, we are gonna fold it one more time. So I've got the bias tape here, and what the pattern instructions say is to start on the outside. But what I like to do, because it saves time and it helps me to control what it looks like on the outside, is start on the inside and stitch in this groove right here, and then flip it over and stitch on the outside. But if you just want to follow the paper instructions, either way works. This is just what works for me. So what will also help is to baste the lining to the bodice fabric and the interlining. But for now, I am just going to pin it. Bias tape is sewn to the wrong side. Now we need to flip it over, but first, before I do that, I'm going to trim a little bit of excess. I'm going to flip it over with that fold that we pressed down already. And at the end right here, I'm going to fold in and fold down. And when sewing, edge stitch on this edge right here. Alright, Alright, so the neck binding is all sewn and it looks really, really good and pretty. I'm going to set this one aside to work on our underlap, or modesty panel in other words. You are going to iron it back, I believe it's 5/8, where these 2 dots are, like that, towards the wrong side. So the fold edge will be on the right side, like that. And you'll repeat on the lining, and then we're going to pin all the way around here, right sides to right sides, and stitch around, but not along here, because we're going to turn it inside out through this side, and we're going to slip stitch it closed. We've sewn around the bottom, the side, and the top, and go ahead and clip the edges. If you'd like to trim it down, you can as well. And now you will understitch on all 3 edges as far as you can go. We'll stitch at the edge, on the lining, down the bottom, and on the top. The edges have been understitched, and then pinning the edge, we're going to slip stitch all the way down to close the seam. The underlap is all good to go, and we're going to place it on this edge right here, matching up the dots. Like that. You're going to pin it, and then slip stitch all the way down here. Alright, good job. We're almost done with this pattern. Now, to make sure that the bodice and the lining stay together, I turn it back right side out. There's so much fabric. Oh gosh. Wow, who patterned this? Lift up the skirt, the contrast skirt. I'm going to match the seam allowance of the bodice with the lining. I'm going to pin it down. You're going to continue to match up the seams until about the side front skirt. And I'm just going to stitch all the way down there and on there on the seam itself. Now it's time to hem. So I've already hemmed the bottom of the contrast fabric. So what really helps me sew with curved edges is I like to stitch about 1/4 inch away as a stay stitch, and then fold that stay stitch up and press it down, and then fold it up again 1/4 inch, press it down, and then stitch it down. Alright, we're just about there. Before I tack up these bustles, I'm going to add some trim to the skirt seams. This is totally optional and it's not in the pattern itself, but I think it's fun, and if you want to get creative and throw anything on the skirt, this is the time to do it before you tack up the bustles. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. I also got a little bit excited down here at the bottom, and I added this trim. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make the bustles. So there should be 2 dots on the center front skirt and 2 dots on the side front skirts. So on the center front here, the 2 dots are right here. So I'm going to match both sides up and pin the 2 layers together on both dots. And then we're just going to do like 1/4 inch stitch just to stay stitch it together. And then we're going to fold it up. You match those 2 points together. And you're going to also just tack it down. What I might do is I might just turn it over and just stitch on this side. Or what you could do is hand sew it as well. And then I'll match up these side front dots together and we'll make a bustle. Alright, then all of them are tacked on and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now we're going to work on pattern piece 27, which is the neckband. Press to the side about 5/8 inch right here on this side and this side, and then put it right sides together, pin all the way around with the folded sides still being folded, and sew all the way down on this side and up, ending here, 5/8 inch. Alright, so now that is sewn, I'm going to clip the edges and trim it to about 1/4 inch. I'm going to leave these seams the way that they are on the sides because I think that would help with the structure of the grommets. Go ahead and turn it inside out, and then the little dots that we transferred from the pattern are going to become the grommets. My favorite part is here. We get to add on appliques, and honestly, whatever you want to throw on top of it, there are no rules here. The amazing thing about this process is that you get to create whatever you want. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna figure it all out and you're gonna hand stitch everything on. It might take some time, but it'll be worth it, I promise. Alright, and for the finishing touches, cut a ribbon that is 34 inches long and lace it through the neckband. And for the back lace up, cut out ribbon that is 156 inches long